How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, November 17th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Minkah Fitzpatrick. The elite starting free safety for the Pittsburgh Steelers turns 25 today, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to cast a little focus on who Minkah Fitzpatrick is as a complete player, and of course, focus on his numbers, his accolades, his achievements, and accomplishments from when he got to the big stage at Alabama to getting through to the NFL and to get where he is right now as a player who's consistently made the Pro Bowl. Considering how many people go out for the NFL every single year, considering how tough it is to make an NFL roster and then be consistently listed as one of the best at your position, I think it would be criminal to not list Minkah Fitzpatrick as one of the elite football players in 2021. So, if you're unfamiliar with who he is, he stands at about 6'1", 207 pounds. He, of course, because he plays defense, he plays safety. He's an incredible tackler. He's a great safety. He's just a very smart player. Nick Saban recruited him at Alabama and said he was brilliant. And as you can see how he adjusts to games over time, even just over the course of the game, if you've ever been able to watch him on defense at Alabama, in Miami, and in Pittsburgh. So originally he would get his start in New Jersey, and he would go on to find himself getting recruited to Alabama after, of course, he established himself as one of the best football players and track runners in the state, might I add. As a true freshman, Minkah Fitzpatrick would go on and start for the Alabama football team. He started in 10 of the 14 games that he played, which is, of course, a rare feat for any freshman to ever do ever, especially in the Nick Saban era where he basically cycles players for only seniors to play because he recruits so many of the best players in the world. But nonetheless, Minkah Fitzpatrick as a true freshman was starting, and then he would go on to play 14 games in his 2015 season, which would go on to be his age 19 season. In the 2015 season, which was Minkah Fitzpatrick's rookie season or his freshman season, Alabama would end up going 14-1, making it all the way to the semifinals where they would end up beating Michigan State in the Cotton Bowl Classic, and they would end up beating Clemson in the national championship that year. That was the year when they beat Deshaun Watson. So Minkah Fitzpatrick in his very first season as a college football player would go on to be named a college football playoff national champion. And in that season, the 14 games he played, he would finish with 45 total tackles on the season as a freshman. He had 3 tackles for loss, a couple of sacks, a couple of interceptions, and both of his interceptions were actually returned for touchdowns. And his 10 passes defensed in his freshman year would end up being the most he ever did in a season at Alabama. So following that 2015 season, many people were at least aware of this player who was at least named a freshman All-American. Following his freshman year, he would be, of course, a full-time starter for Alabama for the second year in a row in his sophomore year, which, of course, is still a rare feat. He would go on to start all 15 games in a season where Alabama would go 14-1, go right back to the college football playoff where they would end up beating Washington 24-7 in the Peach Bowl in the semifinal, right before Deshaun Watson would drive down the field and beat Alabama on a quick out route to win the national championship in January of 2017. But looking at how Minkah Fitzpatrick's second season fared out, in the 15 games he played, he finished with 66 tackles, the most he'd put together in a season at Alabama, 21 more than he did his freshman year. He had 5.5 tackles for loss, a sack and a half. He would go on to finish with 6 interceptions, as he would go on to have 2 pick six, just as many as last year, but his 4 additional interceptions would separate him from the previous year. And he would also go on to force his very first fumble at Alabama his sophomore year. As a sophomore, he would go on to make the first team All-SEC, and he would go on to be a consensus All-American as a sophomore at Alabama, which is showing that, of course, he stood in a class of his own. And now going into his junior year, because of course you have to play 3 years to be eligible for the NFL, he went on to start 13 games in a season where Alabama would go on to finish with a 13-1 record. They would go to the college football playoff where they would go on to beat Clemson in the Sugar Bowl for the semifinal, and then they would go on to beat Georgia in the college football national championship. And this is when Tua Tagovailoa would win the game by throwing the touchdown to Devontae Smith, and Minkah Fitzpatrick would go on to get his second championship in 3 years. And then the other year that he didn't win, they were in the championship and they lost on one play to Deshaun Watson. So I guess I think it's a little to say that Minkah had a very good and a very cherished, a very prized, a very decorated collegiate run. But in that season itself, he would have 60 tackles in the 13 games he played. His 8 tackles for loss were the most he put together in an Alabama season. He had a sack and a half. He would finish with an interception, a forced fumble as well. At the conclusion of the season, he was named to the first team All-SEC for the second year in a row. He was given the Jim Thorpe Award, given to the best defensive back in football. He was given the Chuck Benedrick Award, given to the best defensive player in football. He was named a consensus All-American as well in 2017. And after a very solid draft combine, he would end up being taken with the 11th overall pick in the 2018 NFL draft. He was the first safety taken. The only other safeties taken in the first round with him were Derwin James, the elite safety who is now on the LA Chargers, who was taken with the 17th overall pick. And then Terrell Edmonds was taken by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 28th round, just to get a sense of what that round was about. Also, within that round, drafted with him, Saquon Barkley was the 2nd overall pick. Baker Mayfield was number 1. This was also where Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills was taken with the 7th overall pick. Tremaine Edmonds, the elite linebacker who now plays for the Buffalo Bills, was taken with the number 16th overall pick. And then Lamar Jackson, the elite starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, was taken with the last pick of that 2018 first round. But still, Minkah Fitzpatrick was taken in the middle of that with the 11th pick to be exact. And once he was taken by the Miami Dolphins, he would end up playing there for his very first season. In his age 22 season, which was his rookie season in Miami, he would start 11 of the 16 games he played in 2018 in a season where the Miami Dolphins would go on to finish with a 7-9 record, and this was Adam Gase's last season as the coach. In the 16 games he played, he finished with 80 tackles on the season, which is very solid for a rookie defensive back. He would finish with 9 passes defensed. He had 2 interceptions, as one of those interceptions did return all the way to the house. He also had a couple of tackles for loss as well. And, of course, in 2018, many people were aware of the player that he could be. Following that season, he would start his age 23 season with the Miami Dolphins. He would only play 2 games, and then he ended up getting traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he would immediately get moved there. And I think that was probably one of the few times where you see a player getting a trade that really kind of benefits them this early on when they don't have that much power. But regardless, Minkah Fitzpatrick was able to get the trade to Pittsburgh. And over the 16-game season, he would go on to finish with 69 tackles on the year, 11 less than his rookie season. However, he would go on to finish with 2 forced fumbles with 3 fumble recoveries and a fumble recovery touchdown. He had 9 passes defended, just like his rookie season. He had 5 interceptions, and one of his interceptions ended up going to the house, as he had the longest pick 6 of the 2019 season. And then he would also have a tackle for loss on the season. In his second season in the league, he would get a trade to Pittsburgh. He would be named a Pro Bowler for the very first time in his NFL career, and he would be named to the first team All-Pro in 2019 for the very first time in his NFL career in his second year in the league at the safety position. And he would, at the conclusion of the season, the Steelers would finish with an 8-8 record and miss the playoffs completely. However, the next year they would go on and make it. Following Minkah Fitzpatrick's second season in which he established himself as one of the best safeties in football, he would go on to start all 16 games in his age 24 season in 2020. In a season where the fans couldn't be there because of COVID, but they still played the full season anyway. The Steelers would go on to finish with a 12-4 record, winning the AFC North for the first time in 3 seasons. In that 16-game season, Minkah Fitzpatrick would go on to finish with 79 tackles on the season. He would go on to finish with he finished with 11 passes defensed, which is the most he's ever defensed in a season. He would finish with 4 interceptions on the year, the second most he's ever put together in a season, as he would also return a pick 6 for the 3rd consecutive year for the first 3 years in the league. He would also force a fumble, and at the conclusion of the season, the Pittsburgh Steelers would make the playoffs. Minkah Fitzpatrick was named a Pro Bowler for the 2nd year in a row, proving that his second season in the year wasn't a fluke. And he would go on to make the first team All-Pro for the 2nd year in a row, proving that he's one of the best safeties in football for the 2nd year in a row, proving that this dude might definitely be here to stay. And at the conclusion of the season, the Steelers would finish with a 12-4 record. They would make the playoffs, and they would end up losing in the wild card round to the Cleveland Browns from within their own division. But however, following that 2020 season, many people respected Minkah Fitzpatrick for what he was able to do, and that's the last complete season that he was able to play. So looking at where we are, as the Pittsburgh Steelers are currently sitting on a 5-3-1 record with a really solid case to run for the playoffs, even though they're the team that tied with the only team that hasn't won a game this season. So they have had the worst decision so far this season. But regardless, Minkah Fitzpatrick is having an amazing season as he is on pace to shatter his tackle numbers. And of course, he's able to record a couple of interceptions for himself. He has been playing phenomenal for Pittsburgh, and once his stats are done, I will come back next year once the season is complete. But like I said, Minkah Fitzpatrick, as of right now, is one of the best football players in the world right now. Not only that, he should be recognized as one of the elite. I want to take this time to, of course, first wish Minkah Fitzpatrick a happy 25th birthday. If you have a chance to watch him, he plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's wearing number 39, and he plays in the defense. And he's going to be a very big component to them being a playoff team or not this season. And I want to thank everyone for listening to all 13 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. I want to thank the College Football and Pro Football Reference websites, as well as the NFL and the ESPN, for giving me the facts and figures. Minkah Fitzpatrick is a very amazing player, and the fact that he's only turning 5 is just a hint that there's a lot of good football to come from Minkah Fitzpatrick if he is healthy going forward. And with that said, I want to thank everyone listening, and once all of today's matchups and exhibitions are done, I will come back tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow is Thursday, November 18th, 2021. Thanks for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with more tomorrow. Peace out.